Gandhi was a very stupid person who the British thought they could use as the facade to wash their hands off India.
Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you. Welcome to the party, pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 329. And for the fifth time, it's Jayant Bhandari. He's the first person to achieve this. He's originally from India. He's been all over the world. We're going to talk about the history of India and Pakistan and Bangladesh because there's been some recent skirmishes there, and it doesn't really ever seem to get over it. Nobody signs a treaty, but they just fight now and then they take a break, and then they go back and fight now and then, maybe 10 years later. So how are you, Jayant?
I'm very well, Chris. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Yeah, we've had some awful rain here, but it's been a pretty nice day, and I'm really enjoying this, and it's great to talk to you again. You've got your capitalism and morality seminar coming up too, right?
That's on the 22nd and 23rd of August next month. So I'm looking forward
Okay.
to it in Vancouver downtown.
Yeah, that should go over well. So I'm going to be going down to Argentina at that time, I think, but certainly it sounds like it'll go over well for you. So anyway, we've been looking at the history of Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, the whole subcontinent. Uh, Obviously people have lived there for thousands of years, but let's go back and see where this all might have started. I mean, uh, I guess this started when the British the East India Tea Company showed up, and when was that about? Because there was
So so
yeah,
Yeah, so Chris, here is the issue. You said you used the word history. Now, history is not a concept that is in the soul of the people of South Asia. They had no historical awareness until the time the British arrived, which meant that India had pretty much no written history until the arrival of the British. Uh, Indians had forgotten Buddhism. I know
yeah,
no Buddhist in in my life, and so Indian had no history of their written history of their own. British put together all the history for India. It was a wild place. This was a place without the rule of law. This was a place with the rule of man, and this was a place where everyone was in conflict with everyone else. This was basically a tribal, wild place that had no past, no future, but the focus was always in the present. And that is where the fundamental mindset of these people is. And among these people, at some point, foreigners has started coming up. And about the between the 15th and 17th centuries, Europeans showed up. Portuguese, French, and British showed up. They had their own colonies. All these people, and British occupied what came to be known as most of India. They were parts still under the control of Portugal and France until very late. So British controlled the biggest chunk of what came to be known as India, and there was nothing like India until the British came to control it as a political jurisdiction. They consolidated the place, and when they left the country, there were about 400 kingdoms and principalities in the country, and they had the freedom to either stay independent or be a part of the consolidated India, or whatever would be left as consolidated parts of India. In 1947, there were about 6 or 7 countries which came into exist as when the British departed from the country.
yeah. So I know Portugal had Goa. I did not know that the French had any colonies there, and were the Dutch there as well? Because or Britain was there, and they eventually took over. But what can you tell me about the so really there was no paper there until colonizers came.
Well, there was nothing there until the colonizers came.
Yeah,
Well, actually, the Islamic rulers had already brought in some form of civilization in the country. So, some of the best architectural structures you see in the country from before the British era are of Islamic origin. Now, Chris, I'm no fan of Islam, but just to put this into perspective, India was such a wild place that uh, the arrival of Islam by itself was an improvement on what that country was. Now, improvement I'm using as a word from the from the Western perspective. Increasingly, I'm thinking whether the word improvement was an improvement or it was a perversion, because it does not stick on the psyche of Indians. So they have a tendency to go wild the moment external pressure stops. So, so this is where it is. French ruled a place called Pondicherry, and there were a few other places. I think Diu and Daman were also ruled by French, if I am not incorrect. So there were small kinds of areas ruled by other places, but they were eventually incorporated either within India or Bangladesh or Pakistan.
yeah, yeah. There was some Muslim invasions. Were was Genghis Khan or any of his descendants in India or not?
Yeah, Mongols, Mughals controlled the country for a long time. I think, if I'm not wrong, about 150 years. And the person who arrived in India was Babur, who was from Central Asia, who was uh, 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 a heir to Temur and Genghis Khan. And they controlled at one point of time a huge part of the country.
Yeah. So, so it seems as though the so when did the yeah, is that Babur? Is that Babur?
That's correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
and he wrote he wrote a book called Babur Nama. I have not read the book, but there's a quote from the book which is very famous. He basically says that he dislikes the people, he dislikes the food, he dislikes the climate. He finds everything dysfunctional in that country. So these outsiders, when they arrived in India, very quickly realized that India was quite a wild place.
Yeah, it was quite a wild place. I mean, still you still have a lot of diversity there. I mean, you have what, 50 or 100 languages in the country, and of course a billion people. You have and you also have languages in Pakistan and Bangladesh. I mean, it's a very in some cases the languages aren't even that close. I mean, when the who were some of the first colonizers showed up, and why did they first show up there? Maybe just because
Well,
it's in China or
well, it was. I mean, Chinese showed up for spiritual purposes, from what I understand. It was mostly travelers, isolated travelers who arrived in India to understand the culture and the religion, and they brought from India into China Buddhism, and that's what happened in Japan and Korea as well. So that's how Buddhism arrived in Far East
Mhm.
Asia. However, over a period of time, India completely forgot about that connection. So they did not even know that the Buddhism that existed in Korea, China, and Japan had any relationship with India, because Buddhism died in that country. As I said earlier, I have never met an Indian Buddhist in my life. An Indian Buddhist meant not the one who are recent converts because of political reasons, but I'm talking about a real Buddhist who was a follower because of his ancestry.
Yeah, and, so Portugal was the first to show up, Vasco da Gama in 1498. Then the Dutch, who had a base in Ceylon, which is now, of course, Sri Lanka, and then the British East India Company came, and that was founded in 1600. So, I know Portugal still maintained a colony in Goa for a long time. Is that right? Or
Yes, Portugal, as it did in Macau, which is south of China, maintained a
Yeah.
colony of Goa. And Goa was fully a part of Portugal at that point of time. And today, anyone who was of original Goa origin can still apply for Portuguese passport. So Goa was a part of Portugal, and it was actually about 9 or 10 years after the so-called independence of India that India decided that it wanted to incorporate Goa into India. So it basically attacked the country, incorporated that country, Goa, completely illegally into India. No one wants to talk about it, and because no one wants to ruffle feathers with India. But the problem is that India went against every international law in incorporating Goa. And Goa, people of Goa did not necessarily want to be a part of India because it was a better place, and it was a better run place. It was far more Christian than the rest of the country was. But again, remember that China had a similar situation with Macau. In fact, China actually owned Macau. It had leased Macau rather than Macau being an independent colony of Portugal. Um, they did not attack Macau and take it over because they followed the rule of law, whereas India did not follow the rule of law.
Yeah. So what happened when the British the British India Company showed up? I mean, what were they looking for? I guess is that where they started getting their tea from? Is that where I mean, does tea originate from India or did it originate somewhere else?
No, the concept of tea comes from China. Tea is a Chinese concept, and British over a period of time became very fond of tea, and but then eventually India became an area where they brought in the concept of tea and grow and developed it. So while Indians might think that chai, which is the a word for uh, tea in India, which actually is a derivative from a Chinese word. Chinese call it something similar. And Indians then picked up tea, and they now think that that concept of chai comes from India, but no, it's a British concept. British brought that concept from China.
Okay. Well, it's always been something the British have loved. I mean, very, having their tea. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't know if those traditions. So what happened after? So what happened with the colonization? I mean, was it mostly just? I mean, a lot of these companies, too, it employed their own armies and their own ships and had their own navies, and they were de facto countries, right? I mean, what ca-
Yeah, the East India Company came to India to trade. They started taking over parts of the country. That's the way the world worked those days. It is very easy for people of today to judge the people of the past using today's standards, but that's the way the world worked. Whatever you expropriated became your own, and that's how the property rights concept existed in the world. uh, but in fact, that's the property rights concept exists in South Asia even today. I mean, if you squat over a property, or if you have political connections, it's your property. You can do whatever you want. So British came as traders, and they were no saints, but that was and they were able to bribe uh, generals of those smaller Indian kingdoms and principalities to start taking over, nibbing away that country. And almost never was there a proper war between the British and the local militaries, because everyone in that country could be bribed. And that is, again, a very much a part of the culture of that country.
So bribes are very much a part of the culture.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is a culture which has, I call it an amoral culture, which does not have the concept of morality, and it does not have the values that Western people think of as virtues. So those things don't exist. So corruption is the way of life in that country. Corruption, using from the Western perspective, For Indians, if you are corrupt and if you can get away with it, you get praised by other Indians. People look up to it. If a woman is looking for a match, her parents, if it's an arranged marriage, parents would shamelessly ask for how much bribes the groom makes, the prospective groom makes. So that's corruption has no negative connotations associated in that culture.
So the man has to buy a wife, is that what you're saying? Or
No, he doesn't have to buy a wife. What I'm saying is that uh, that corruption, what you think of as corruption, has no negative connotations in that country.
yeah.
In fact, generally, it is the family of the girl who, if you use the counterpart of buying, it is actually selling that the family of the girl has to do, which means that they have to pay a dowry to marry their daughter to a guy, and this dowry can be really obnoxious. I mean, in my own family, a female member was married, and after the marriage wedding was over, the bride had gone into the hotel with the groom. uh, Early in the morning, an instruction to pay an extra dowry came in. So again, remember, this is a country without the concept of honor, without the concept of contracts, without the concept of respect for other people, which means that you have no problems trying to extract the maximum from the other party. And so, that morning, and I still remember vividly that morning, my dad and granddad were rushing around to organize the cash for the extra dowry, because the groom's parents had offered to return the bride back. Now remember, the marriage had been consummated over the night, so there was no way the my my family member could be married to someone else. So this is just a horrific culture that the cesspool of horrific culture that this country exists in.
Yeah, and so it's always been that way, so they just brought but, and obviously, since some of these companies had a lot more
No,
money.
no, no, no. Let me correct there, Chris. It was not always like this. This is a huge, huge, huge improvement on what India was before the arrival of the British. Before the arrival of the British, it was a wild, wild place. There was a concept of thuggy, which meant that people would. It was actually, you could hardly travel in many parts of the country because they were organized gangs, and these were people who are followers of certain goddesses at that point of time. The word thug comes from Indian languages. And there was a concept called sati, where a woman, a widow, would be burnt on the funeral pyre of her husband's. The caste system was absolutely obnoxious. So English improved massively on what was the situation in that country. They tried to organize it. They tried to bring in the rule of law in that country. Now, English were, of course, no saints. No one is saint. You are not a saint. I'm not a
Yeah,
saint. So I'm not judging anyone from the absolute standard of sainthood. What I'm saying is, it was on the relative basis, it was such a huge improvement. So, no, India was not always like this. It was much worse. This current dowry system is nothing compared to what used to happen. But India is heading back to that situation very slowly, but it will get there.
yeah. You talked about SETI. What was that other word you used? HUP or
Thug. So there's an
how
English
do you
word
spell
called
that?
thug, Thug.
THUG, okay.
Yeah.
THUG, yeah, tug, yeah. So,
And also the word dacoit comes from Hindi, Dacoit. These are because these are the way Indian society existed, which meant that everyone was trying to expropriate whatever it could from anyone else they could get away with. And that is exactly the system even today, except for the hollowed out institutional structure that the British left behind. But that structure is falling apart as well.
yeah, so it was an improvement, so So it was, and obviously the colonizers had more to bribe with, I assume. So that's where the system of bribes came in. But so,
No, again,
all right,
bribing is has no negative connotations in the
yeah,
country. India was always like that. There's no concept of honesty and dishonesty in that country. You should not look at India with the duality of honesty and dishonesty, good or bad. The way the Indian mind works is, what can I get away with, and that is what the Indian mind calculates, how a Indian mind calculates everything. So, bribing by itself is not really a concept there. The word rishwat, which is the Hindi word for bribe, comes from the Middle East. It's not even of Indian origin. This is not really a concept
mhm.
that existed or exists even today in the Indian mind as a moral concept.
Okay. So once the British came in, what and really, how did they consolidate, and what did they bring with them? How did they improve things? Obviously,
So,
they
so
had
I
they had
just
boats. So
So I just talked about how easy it was to bribe around. I can go to today, even today, I can go to any public servant, pretty much anyone, including the very top politicians or bureaucrats, and offer him money right away, and he will take it. That's how the country works. You often slip in of $2 or $5 with into the hands of the bureaucrat even today, uh, and to get your work done. If I want a train ticket from New Delhi to Bhopal, which is my hometown, I would slip in a piece of cash to the ticket agent so that he gives me the ticket. Otherwise, he will refuse to give me the ticket. So, the British found it very easy to bribe around people. Also, given the fact that Indians have no moral fabric, there was no organizational structure in that country. People couldn't really organize. There was no concept of honor. Anyone could be sold for money, and so it was a culture in which the British found very easy to operate in, where they could bribe around. They could pretty much they had the this organizational capacity compared to what Indians were capable of. So even with a small force, they were able to very rapidly expand into the country by buying out in whatever way they could. And most citizens, most Indians, people of that area were happy with British taking over slight control, because British enabled some kind of liberty for those people, breathing space in the sense that British were more compassionate and tolerant. Now, of course, this is from on a relative basis. So most people went along with the British, and in fact, when my grandfather had photographs of the British royalty in his office, and the reason was that his generation respected the British from the perspective of the junkies, brain dead, sadistic rulers India got after the so called independence.
certainly. So yeah, that sometimes it's just easier to bribe people than it is to try to set up a system morals, I guess. And you might say it's maybe that way in some other countries like Mexico too. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, all the third world countries have the same system. Your bribes are a necessary part of the interaction with between people, and as a result, people are also very atomized. You can only bring in people together through harmony and through contracts and through the honor system. But unfortunately, in third world countries, and this is actually very true with Mexico as well. Mexico and most of all of Latin America actually, uh, uh, or most of Latin America, except I think for to a degree with Uruguay and Argentina, because they have a European majority population. But otherwise, bribes are necessary parts of the culture. And the locals, if you look into the minds of those locals, and you have to sort of put yourself in their shoes to start understanding that they don't really have negative connotations associated with with exploiting your position of power for resources.
Certainly. So what did the so who are some of the figures who came in when the British came in? I mean, when did they, when did they start to consolidate the country? Because we often think of the British Indian Empire, it was sometimes called, which included Pakistan, India. It also included Burma and Bangladesh, and I think Nepal and Bhutan. What can you tell me about the consolidation? When did
Well,
this happen?
Nepal was never a part of the British
Right.
India, and Myanmar was not considered a part of India. However, what used to be known as Burma used to be run by Indian administrators, uh, because British found it uh, easier to bring in administrators from India to Burma. Um, uh, I mean, it was a process over maybe, let's say, uh, uh, mid 17th century to mid 18th century, that the British were able to expand from their arrival to incorporating virtually all of what came to be known as India under their control. It wasn't too difficult because money talks in that region. You can bribe around. You people are very greedy for resources, because that's what the focus of their psyche is.
Yeah, and as you pointed out, there's no concept of time, so it's always a hand to mouth thing. It's not about
The-
saving for. It's never about saving for a rainy day or anything like
yeah,
that.
No, again, there's no concept of future, because concept of future only comes in symbiosis with the concept of honor and contracts. If you don't have those concepts, then everything is about now. Tomorrow does not matter. Analyzing tomorrow does not matter. In fact, the word in Hindi for future and tomorrow is the same. So when I say yesterday, the word in Hindi is kal. When I say future, tomorrow, the word in Hindi is kal. It's the same word. Now, of course, the context makes it clear whether I'm talking about the future or yesterday. However, to a certain degree, tells you that originally, um, before the British put together Hindi. Now, Hindi, with the biggest language of India, is a language created by the British. It is not of Indian origin. So so they brought that together, but the way the words evolve tells you something about the psyche of the people.
How did the words evolve, and what does that tell us?
Again, the fact that the 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 word for yesterday and future is skull tells you that at some point of time, people did not really think about yesterday and tomorrow. They were pretty much the same thing. They were two similarly comparable, abstract issues in their minds. They cared mostly about today, and relationships are transactional, for in the sense that they what matters is today. In fact, I struggle with it even today when I get into a business relationship in India. Um, Even though the other party should know that there's a future of that business relationship to continue if he acts honorably, he is not very likely to act honorably, because he wants to maximize his earnings for today, even if it costs him earnings of tomorrow, because the concept of future thinking, the concept of honor, the concept of contract is not a moral concept in that country.
So did they even have calendars or have clocks or what? I mean, or when did those arrive if they didn't
Well,
have
of course, I mean, of course, they exist, but at one point of time, it was only a minority of people who followed the concept of calendar. But I doubt if India had the concept of time.
Mhm.
The concept of time, the way we now look at time, in our minutes or seconds basis. I don't think Indians had that until Europeans start sending clocks to the country.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but uh, the concept of time does not exist in the sense that if if someone promises to come and visit me today at 4 o'clock, it might not happen for a week, and then he might suddenly appear without any sign of being apologetic. He does not consider failure to arrive on time or even on the day as something wrong. This is something similar across the third world. You see this exactly the same in Africa. They're clueless about the concept of time and days. You see the same in the Caribbeans. You see the same mostly in Latin America as well.
Yeah, do you think maybe that's because India's closer to the equator that they don't really think much about time? Do
Yeah,
they really have seasons? Do they really have much fluctuation in days and nights, you know?
that's the key thing, and that's how we have evolved differently in the tropics and in the cold parts of the world. In the colder parts of the world, people had to have the concept of honor. They had to have the concept of honesty, just as utilitarian values, because that's how they could
Yeah.
survive together.
Mhm.
And they had to trust each other. They had to believe that the other person would have his back, those kind of things. None of those things needed to be taken care of in a warm tropical climate, because uh, the, the
Yeah.
the food was available throughout the year, whereas in the colder countries you had
Mhm.
to organize for the winter time.
Yeah, in some of these places, you might have 16 hours of daylight at the solstice and then 16 hours of night at the other solstice. Everybody gets half and half over the course of a year, but some of them, it's much more spread out. So, yeah, of course, India did, develop 0. Is some, certainly some history of Indian mathematics. I don't know where that comes from or if you can comment on that, but
Well, no one really knows exactly how the concept of zero developed. Again, as I said earlier, Indians had no history, written history, until the arrival of the British. It was British who put together everything, and British were consistently looking for good things in the past of India uh, to to help Indians absorb good values from their own past. So I'm not sure where the concept of zero comes from. Now, some people even say that it actually came from the Middle East, not from India. And the people, there's no full clarity on it. But it does not matter, Chris, if the concept of zero came from India. I like to say that India literally and figuratively created zero, because that is the only thing India seems to have invented or created as a part of as a brick for the future civilization. And you shouldn't really be too impressed about it when 1/4 of the world's population is made up of Indians.
really, is it up to 1/4 now?
Y-
It's
Yeah, well,
yeah.
so 17% is Indians. Then you have Bangladesh and Pakistan with about
Okay.
close to 500 million people, and then you
Oh, yeah.
have the Indian Indians living in other countries. So you add all those
Oh, yeah.
together, and you start getting very close to
Yeah.
25%.
Yeah, what was, say, the population of England or the population of Britain and the population of India in, say, 1600?
I don't know about the population of the United Kingdom, but I do know approximately what the population of India was. It was the last time I calculated, the current population of India is about 20 times the population of India before the arrival of foreigners. So I would have thought that today the population is 1,500 million, so the population was probably close to 75 million,
Yeah,
75 to 100 million people.
yeah. You mean it's 1,500,000,000 now, yes.
1.5 billion today. Yeah.
Yeah, so Yeah, it looks like, found this graph in 1800 is about 169 million. So,
Yeah, something similar, about 100 to 150 million people. And this is an approximation because there was no census those days. Indians don't really added up people together. Even today, no one really knows what is the population of the country because the census that India does is unreliable. So you don't really know, plus minus a few 100 million is not a big issue in that country.
yeah, I know, for example, when I saw years ago when I saw the movie Gandhi, though, one of the things that I remember was, you had people actually riding on top of the trains because apparently there
Uh,
wasn't room in the cars on the trains because they're already full. So,
Yeah, and it's the same today, except that because trains are electrified, you can't really go on top of the trains. Now you hang outside the doors of those trains. So in a different way, but the situation is very similar even today. India is more than happy to spend money on the so-called moon mission or sending a paid passenger. Uh, Paid by Indian taxpayers to the international station, but they don't want to look at these details that affect the daily life because that's not what matters to the rulers of that country.
and is it fair to say that that's probably one of the most important contributions Britain gave to India was they gave India the railroads?
I, I don't think so. I think what the biggest contribution Europeans gave to the third world or even to Far East Asia was a concept of humanistic values and Christianity. They gave the
Yeah,
concept of moral fabric, particularly to the people of the tropical countries, because there was no such concept until their arrival. I think for in the long term, in the at the core, that was the biggest, by far, the biggest contribution they made to the tropical countries. They made it possible for these people to start in very vague way, organize themselves, come together, work in some vague harmony, and be vaguely trustful of each other, which meant that the population of the third world is now about 20 times compared to what it would have been had Europeans never influenced these hellholes.
yeah. What do you think accounts for as you said, the lack of honor among these people? Is it just because they didn't have to have honor? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, again,
why
you
wouldn't
are
people want
using
to build? Why wouldn't you want to build positive relationships with your people instead of just
yeah,
yeah,
that's your Western mind thinking that way, and that's what I said
yeah,
earlier. Western mind thinks in terms of duality because Western mind uh, has come to accept a basic moral fabric and some basic virtues and values as a given, as a part of the universe, because that's how you grow up. You take those things for granted, but uh, Indians simply don't have the concept of honor, and they never had the um, uh, evolutionary force on the culture to develop the concept of honor. Uh, the
mm,
the 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 what worked for now was uh, expropriating as much of resources as possible as you could get away with, and that was the psyche of the people.
does India have what kind of resources does India have? What kind of resources have they had?
Well, India is actually a very resource-rich country. The plains are very fertile. The natural resources are very good.
Yeah,
The southern part of India was connected with southeastern part of India was at one point of time connected with northwestern part of Australia. So the natural resources are extremely good in that country.
yes.
However, India has virtually no mining outside coal and iron ore. And the reason is that getting anything done in that country is virtually impossible. I work as an analyst in the natural resource industry. I've worked for multi-billion dollar mining companies in North America looking for projects and trying to organize something in India. But it is virtually impossible because, again, remember, everything happens because of bribes in that country. And if that is the only thread that brings people together, you can't really have a sustainable organization. So organizations in that country are completely unsustainable, and you cannot really calculate for the future because anything can happen into the future. The government can expropriate your properties tomorrow. So unfortunately, and or anyone can expropriate your property tomorrow. So this is the way the the country works.
But, this is not legal advice, but I guess if I bribe the right person, I can keep maintain my property, or, I mean, is that I mean
No, no, because again, there's no honor culture. If I bribe
yeah,
a person today, he will take the bribe and not uh, honor the his side of the contract. So you have to be very strategic in how you bribe people. If you know, really, if you could bribe and get things done, everyone would be doing the same thing, and everyone would be becoming a billionaire in that country. But unfortunately, unlike in Malaysia or Indonesia, where at least the corrupt people have some concept of honor, Indians don't have that concept of honor, which means that you if you bribe today, it might not work tomorrow for you. So you have to be very strategic about it. You have to sort of agree on how you would pay bribes so that your work gets done. And one very important thing that you must have is some kind of connection, because connections ensure that the bribe based contract is honored, and the connection is, of course, again, corrupt relationship in which a medical doctor uh, would approach a politician trying to get something done, and the politician would ensure that the uh, corrupt contract works because politician needs to use the doctor in the future. So that's it's all resource based contracts and resource based honor system. They are not really honor system as such.
when did the British really start to consolidate the country? Was it in the 1840s or sometime like that? I mean, I know they
No,
did try
they
to
had
yeah,
they had consolidated quite a bit by 1840s. It was
yeah,
already by 1850s. It was already a time for the British government to take over the control of the country from East Asia, from East India Company,
and they
because the ruler of India was East Asia Company.
just had to bribe people in the right place to take over, or what how did they
Not
accomplish this takeover?
Yeah, I mean, see, so British did not directly control most of the country. They had uh, bits and pieces of the country under their direct control, but most there were still 400 kingdoms and principalities in the country, but they had
Mm.
accepted um, um, uh, British as the main ruler of the country. So they accepted becoming being a part of the British Empire. So so it was only indirectly that they controlled most of the country.
So it was only indirectly that they controlled most of the country.
That's correct. Yeah,
So they had their people in high positions though who kinda took orders for it from them though, so
that's true. Yeah.
and these are the kind I suppose these are the kind of tribal chiefs or whatever who would probably if France had come offered and offered them more money, they would have went with France, or they just went with Britain because Britain offered them the most, or
Yeah, I
Britain
mean,
or
it was clearly that the British carrot and stick policy worked better than
yeah,
that of French and Dutch or Portuguese. British were very good in terms of organizing themselves. It was, it was quite an achievement that these people were able to control so much of the third world because they had that superior organizational capability, and that capability came from a certain moral fabric and virtues and values that underpinned the British society.
about 1850, Britain only had about 16,000,000 people, so it wasn't like this was a small country that relatively small country that, took over all these colonies. It was quite amazing. They must have
So at the height of their power in India, I think Britain had no more than 30,000 people ruling India.
yeah,
So compare it with the fact that India had 300 million population when the British left. Only 30,000 people at the height of the British control were there. India was run through Indian administrators, and that's
Yeah.
how that country worked.
Yeah, and so the Indian administrators got to live a better life, and they probably got more money from it, and of course, did that help India, and that also helped India get richer? Is that true? I mean, what were the benefits for the average Indian during this system? I mean, for example, well, we got things like railroads, but yes.
Yeah, an average Indian his life improved reasonably over because of the British European control. Now, i- just imagine what India would be like had colonizers never arrived in that country. Uh, it would have nothing like railways. It would have not discovered as yet the concept of the wheel. Half or more of the population still doesn't know the concept of the wheel. They carry weights on their heads. There would have been no concept of the post office. There would be virtually nothing that we consider to be modern. There would have been very basic farming of isolated people. There would have been very limited use of tools. Even today, most of Indian farmers do not use tractors or modern machines because their farms are very small, and they don't really, the concept of technology does not stick in their minds, which means that
Yeah.
they prefer to do their manual work to do farming. So
Shovels, hoes,
without the
rakes, or,
sorry, say that again.
shovels, hoes, rakes. I mean, do they have that equipment or
Very basic Indian counterpart of those equipment, but my suspicion would be that even those historically came from European influence because there was trade happening between India and ancient Europe.
Mhm.
Romans were trading with India. Um, Greeks were trading with India. So some of those concepts did come to India, but none of those things would have existed had India never come in touch with outsiders. The way, it's very easy to imagine what sub-Saharan Africa was like before colonizers came, because sub-Saharan Africa was isolated from the rest of the world. They had no farming, they had virtually no written language. The only written language
Yeah.
that you can trace back to in sub-Saharan Africa is Arabic, and that came because of Arabs,
Yeah.
and it was only used for religious purposes. They could not really conceive of the concept of using it for social purposes. They had no
Mhm.
concept of farming, no concept of tools. So I think much better to think of India, had it not been influenced by outsiders, as what sub-Saharan Africa was 200 years back.
What kind you've mentioned, part there are some Muslim parts, but what was the primary religion there?
There was no primary religion. There's no primary religion even today. The concept of Hinduism was a colonial concept as well. British decided that they wanted to give a structure to something that could not be structured. So what they did is that they gave a common name of Hinduism to this conglomerate, to all these des- uh, 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 different, often at uh, fight with each other pagan beliefs, and they gave that um, an umbrella term called Hinduism, which means that a lot of these people under that umbrella do not necessarily consider themselves Hindus, and they don't like each other.
Okay, so but there's no but most religions do have a concept of honor, but Hindu never had that concept of honor. It's never
What do you mean by most? It's Abrahamic
well, most
religions.
would be more than half.
Yeah, I mean, see, no, there's no moral fabric, no virtues that underpin the Indian society. It does not matter which religion you are. Even if you're a Christian in India, you don't really have that honor culture because the 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 core culture of India does not provide you with a moral fabric. So you might pay lip service to certain virtues, but those are not a part of your core psyche. um, so, yes, I mean that is why the word religion does not apply to India, and British were erroneous in using the same word for Indian religions because these are pagan belief systems, and people of the past were very good at differentiating between pagan beliefs and religions because pagan beliefs were animalistic. They were after resources. You would do sacrifice of an animal or a human being to get rain, for example. So these were not religion the way the Western mind thinks religion as. There is no drive towards an spiritual existence. There's no higher purpose in that religion. The only purpose they have is resource extraction. So a person who goes to the temple today, and I'm talking virtually everyone I know, he does not go to the temple to for the betterment of himself, for the betterment of the society. He goes to the temple to have a contract with the god to get a better past next life, or a better job, or more money, or financial success. So that's what drives the reason why Indians go to the temple or to the church or to the mosque.
So from there, as you said, there's no concept. And I know there's some other things like there's Islam, there's Sikhism, I believe that's called, and there's some other religions. So maybe there really isn't a major religion there. It's just like the languages.
Yeah, and of course, when you try to think of India as different religions, you get lost in this madhouse. The good way to understand India is that religion, their superficial religion doesn't matter. What matters
Yeah.
is the underpinning cultural values, which are amoral and irrational, and that's when you really start to understand that. Uh, Islam, Sikhism, or Hinduism, the so-called Hinduism, are Tweedledum versus Tweedledee. They are pretty much the same thing with different garb,
With different what?
with a different facade.
Oh, different sod. Yeah. Hindu believes in reincarnation. Is that correct?
Yes, they do, and I'm not sure. I should have thought about that where that comes from, because
Yeah.
Indians don't think about the future as such. They are fatalistic. Even the
Okay.
educated ones can be very, very fatalistic. So I don't know if this is just a Buddhist concept which had been forgotten in India,
Mhm.
or it is I mean, the words are used, but I don't know what connection it has to the real psyche of the people.
Yeah, it's true. So, for a lot of people who call themselves Christians, it's just kind of a show. They don't really believe it. They just do it because it makes people think they're better. It's a way to show, hey, I'm a good person. I'm a Christian. Look at me. But uh, so where do you? Once the British consolidated, where when did this agitation for independence start? I mean, uh, did it start as soon as things were consolidated, or was it the 1870s, 1880s? When did that begin?
Yeah, I don't think there ever was a real freedom movement in that country. Those
Yeah,
fake freedom movements are now considered to be fake freedom movements. But India did not get its so-called independence from the British by fighting for freedom. Let's look at it this way: in the 1850s, there was a rebellion in the Indian army, and the reason for rebellion was that they were they it was mostly underpinned by um, asking for more money. There was no concept of nationhood. Now, this is another interesting thing. The concept of nationhood is a European concept. It's not
yeah,
an Indian concept. When I was growing up, the word nation translated into Hindi meant my local area. So when
yeah,
you talked with an average Indian and used the word nation, he meant his local tribe or local village. That's all he meant
yeah,
by that. So
yeah.
they didn't really care who ruled them, because
Mhm.
they had no concept of self rule anyway. So Indians did not have that concept. It was whatever concept of nationhood in vague form that came to India came from Europeans.
Yeah.
So, in the late 18th century, an English guy called Macaulay arrived in India. He was a prolific writer. I don't think he was very educated. He gets a bad reputation today because he implemented the usage of English in the country. He brought in the British common law to the country. He wanted to uplift the psyche of Indians. Uh, and so uh, you know so so th- so these are the people
Yes.
who brought sort of vague enlightenment in India.
Was that Thomas
However,
Macaulay?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, Macaulay. Okay, thank you. Keep going.
Yeah, and you go through what he wrote. I'm just simply amazed with the amount of work he did, despite the fact that he was running a country as well. So just the productivity of these people just is mind-boggling. And now, so whatever concept of nationhood existed in India in 1850s came from Europeans, and the Congress party, which became the ruling party at the independence of India, was started by a British woman called Annie Besant. So again, everything was a British creation. All freedom fighters of India, all the leaders of the
Yes.
freedom fighting movement in India were educated in Britain, and that's when they got this vague concept of independence. And Britain was already going leftist in the early 19th century.
Yes.
And there was this what I might call sort of leftism started to arise, in which they wanted to give self governance to
Yeah.
natives when natives had no concept of self governance.
Yeah.
So
And
it all got started in Britain, and Indian psychopaths and power hungry people use that for their own expropriatory purposes, and that is why the third world eventually virtually all of them came to be ruled by pathetic psychopaths.
yeah, so Annie Besant, that's Besant, yes, she was British.
That's
So,
correct. Yeah. Yeah.
so
And I'm
yeah,
again,
so now
Chris,
maybe
I'm
if you
not,
can
Chris, I just want to warn you, I'm not a historian and you are asking these questions off the cuff. And maybe I'm slightly wrong here. So if anyone is
yeah,
listening and want to do a bit of research before taking what I say as granted,
yeah.
then it will be a better choice.
Well, that's why I wanna know how to spell these people's names so people can look them up. Of course, the most, in the West, without a doubt, the name we all know is, that of Mahatma Gandhi. What can you tell us about Gandhi?
My guess is, Chris, that Gandhi was a very stupid person who the British thought they could use as the facade to wash their hands off India. That's what they did with Robert Mugabe. That's what they did with a lot of local native rulers, because
Yeah,
they wanted to have a clean break from these third world hellholes. The British had come to realize that there was no way to really sustainably keep these people organized, and that these people would fall apart, and they wanted to release themselves from blame in the future. So they looked around for local psychopaths and local morons to wash their hands off and leave the future for them to decide on. And they chose this guy who was living in South Africa, who had spent most of his adulthood in South Africa. Uh, and so the Gandhi arrived in India, I think in his early 40s, and he was just became a tool in the process of the British to wash their hands off. Leftist movement was picking up very rapidly during the First World War. I think right in the process of the First World War, the British foreign minister or foreign secretary brought in the concept of letting go of these. these the letting go of the empire. So it was originated in Britain. That's when Gandhi came into existence, and you don't really fight for independence through peaceful means. This is such a moronic idea, in my view.
Yeah.
You fight for civilization through your blood. That's what works. That has
Yeah.
always worked. And the only reason, I think, the reason the Western countries are uh, them losing control over their societies is because they don't think you have to fight for their societies uh, through you have to fight for your societies, and fighting means fighting. It's not There's no peaceful way to
Yeah.
negotiate with an enemy.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. So, yeah, as you're pointing out, the British just wanted I did a show on Rhodesia, though, and it sounds like what they did there was absolutely horrible. But, there is one thing I do wanna address, though. What can you say about, the Jallianwala Bagh massacre? I mean, this was in 1919, which was a definitely not one of the more evil things Britain did do. I mean, can you what or at least that's how it's been portrayed.
Yeah, because English were honorable and moral enough to accept any mistake they made. So Jallianwala Bagh incident, in which the soldiers were ordered to shoot at protesters,
Yeah,
in which, except for the top leader, I can't think of his name right now. Uh, every soldier was an Indian who was more than happy to shoot at the protesters. Now, before this happened, English women had been raped. There was a lot of um, crisis in Punjab. Uh, and they had been told not to protest in that area, but they still managed to come in.
yeah,
And at one point of time, the British officer asked their soldiers to start shooting, and the chaos was so much that he could not really. His order to stop shooting did not go through.
yeah,
So the soldiers kept on shooting. I can't remember how many people died, but quite a few Indians
yeah,
were dead.
and most of these people didn't have any weapons at all. They were just out there. Yeah, it's a but that was
No, how do you know? How do you
well,
know they didn't have
yeah,
weapons?
that
Uh,
but
uh,
yeah,
and those things are not uncommon.
yeah,
Have not been uncommon since the departure of British. It's just that Indians themselves have no honor culture, so they will not recognize the criminalities they involve themselves in, but they pick on one or two things that the British might or might not have done, and exaggerate them to portray how bad British were, while Indians are all saints. I mean, look at the horrific nature of what is happening today. Let's say in Kashmir, or in northeastern part of Indian province of Manipur. Um, uh, you know, tens of thousands of people get killed. Police in India today has an open license to kill anyone it wants to, uh,
yeah,
which, in my view, is worse than what happened under Saddam Hussein or Stalin.
certainly, yeah. The leader of that was named Reginald Dyer. Yeah,
Dyer, and he was killed by an Indian at one point of time in the United Kingdom.
yeah, which isn't really a shocker. So in 1947, there's independence, and then we immediately have the splits. So what's happening with the splits? Because
So,
India's
so,
all
for,
one
so
large.
firstly, we have to use the words rightly. There was no split. There were 400 principalities in the
Yes,
country, in what came to be known as India, and the British, in agreement with what came to became the leader of Pakistan and India, this agreed that anyone who wanted to stay independent would be allowed to stay independent, while there would be two core areas, Pakistan and India. So there could have been about 400 countries or so in that region. But these people, being what they were, without moral fabric or rational behavior,
mhm,
decided to force themselves on the smaller people around them. And eventually, about I think 5 or 6 countries came into existence. Goa was, of course, an independent country under Portuguese. India came into existence. Pakistan came into existence, which was made up of East Pakistan and West Pakistan. Kashmir was an independent country. Um,
Yeah.
Sikkim was an independent country. Bhopal, where I grew up, was an independent country. Hyderabad, a big part of what is now in India, was an independent country. However, because of the expropriatory character of the people of these countries, all these smaller places were forcibly incorporated within India. Uh, Kashmir was stuck in between Pakistan and India. Neither side could force Jammu and Kashmir, to become a part of either Pakistan or India. So it was left in a sort of limbo as an independent country, and it should have been left as an independent country. But of course, as you know, that didn't happen because both these expropriatory people, without a moral fabric or on a culture, wanted to expropriate that land, what is known as Jammu and Kashmir.
Yeah, Jammu and Kashmir. Of course, I don't know how easy it would be for them to go it alone considering that they're in the mountains up there, they have no coastline. Were some of these regions completely landlocked or completely surrounded? Do you think maybe that was part of the problem?
Well, again, as I said, Goa was actually
Yeah.
connected with the ocean. That didn't stop
Yes.
India from taking it over. These are people who do not honor any contract. You can sit down with them, fine tune a contract with them, and the moment something goes in against their favor, against them, they will renege on the contract. So they have uh, um, no respect for any contract. Um, so Jammu and Kashmir should have been left by itself, untouched, but that's not what India and Pakistan did.
Yeah. So, was there but, at least, it seems as though all the Muslims went to East and West Pakistan and the non-Muslim stayed in India, is that correct?
Not necessarily. India has a larger Muslim population than Pakistan has, or
Okay.
at least what the current Pakistan has.
Yeah.
So, yes, if you think about the post independence
Mhm.
Pakistan, it had more Muslims. But if you compare uh, 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 today India with Pakistan or Bangladesh, India has more Muslims.
Yeah, okay. So, that's very interesting. How many Muslims do live in India?
I think it's about 200 million people. It's the second biggest Islamic population outside Indonesia, except for Indonesia.
Yeah, Indonesia. Yeah, and India has 28 states and 8 territories, so it's, the states still have quite a bit of autonomy, right? I mean, do they
Uh,
or
not necessarily. I think with time, India is becoming more and more centralized under the current prime minister. The top level bureaucrats are almost directly controlled by the central government. So states are states, but the central government apply a humongous amount of control over everything in the country.
and as you pointed out, really, the concept of India as a country really is a British invention, right? I mean, it never really was a unified country before Britain showed up.
Yeah, and even when Muslim rulers controlled the country, it was more for tax extraction and control rather than people of that area thinking in terms of being citizens of that country. So there was no India as a nationhood in the minds of people. In fact, until I was, when I was growing up, there was no concept of Hinduism, or there was not much of a concept of Hinduism or nationhood among Indians. It has been inculcated over the last few decades using propaganda and and
Yeah.
the radio and the television.
Yeah, I suppose it's also by intellectuals, because, but, does the average I mean, do these people do they think of themselves as, being a citizen of India, for example, or a city of Rajasthan or Gujarat or one of these other kind of states?
Yeah, today they think of themselves as citizens of India, but it's a very strange nationalistic thing in their mind. They are very proud of India. They are very proud of being Indians in a very hypocritical way, in a very inferiority complex way, when they hate every other Indian. So India as Indian nationalism in their mind is more about an identity issue that they have in their own minds rather than a sense of brotherhood with the people of India. So there's no brotherhood among Indians.
I figured that, and of course, they also realize, that an American or somebody in England isn't going to know what the names of these states are, but they do know what India is, so that makes it easier to identify themselves.
Well, I think there are many reasons they identify themselves in opposition to the other party. So,
Yeah.
nationhood and the religious organization and institutions come into existence through harmony, through productive endeavors of a collective. However, people of South Asia do not think that way. They come together in opposition to an outsider. So India uh, gets some sanity as a nation in opposition to an external enemy, a created external enemy like Pakistan. And similarly, Pakistan needs its legitimacy in opposition to an external enemy. Similarly, Hindus in the United Kingdom or Canada or uh, Khalistani Sikhs in these two countries uh, can feel a sense of togetherness and brotherhood in opposition to an external enemy.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they would get fragmented.
You've actually said in some ways that Pakistanis seem to be less competent than Indians. Is that true or
I'm never sure of it, Chris. So the I'm always not sure about which one is better. The problem is, Chris, that if I gave you uh, two different turds and said whether turd A is tasty or turd B is tasty, you would struggle with it because they are both
yes.
repulsive and disgusting. Uh, and so it is hard to decide whether Pakistan is better or India is better because they are very similar. In 99% of the ways, they are more similar. The only thing that sometimes I feel good about Pakistan, slightly good, not too good. Slightly good is because of Islam, they have more sense of objectivity. They have more sense of time because they pray 5 times a day, and they have more sense
Mhm.
of commitment because they don't eat non-halal food and they don't drink. However, Islam. So from that perspective, when I think that way, I start thinking better about Pakistan. But then Islam infuses in you a certain kind of frenzy, a crazy
Yes.
frenzy in certain kind of people. That when I see that, I suddenly become very negative about Pakistan. But um, look at the past history of 76 years of so-called independence. Pakistan on per capita GDP basis has done better than India, mostly, except for the last decade, over which Islamic frenzy has overtaken Pakistan. My guess is that in the long term, Pakistan might do slightly better. In fact, Bangladesh was doing better than India and Pakistan until recently,
Yeah.
about a year back when Sheikh Hasina's term collapsed. But then you are still comparing GDP per capita of 2,500 with
Mhm.
GDP per capita of 2,000, and that is pretty much the comparison you are making. Compared to Europe and America, where GDP per capita is 60,000 US dollar, um, these are all shitholes and they will always be shitholes and they will continue to get worse. Which part will get worse faster? I'm not sure about.
So what caused that? So yeah, speaking of Bangladesh, it was West Pakistan and East Pakistan. I believe that was 1971. What caused that? What was the reasoning behind was it just because they were geographically apart, or why did Bangladesh say, "We wanna be Bangladesh," instead of just be part of Pakistan?
Um, uh, uh, um, so, despite the fact that East Pakistan had a higher population than West Pakistan, somehow, and I don't know the details, the West Pakistan managed to keep political control over East Pakistan. So the governance of Pakistan did not emerge from the majority area of East Pakistan, which is actually more homogeneous as well. They are made up of Bengalis. They actually are they speak the same language. So, but somehow they were oppressed by, and that's the history I am taught
Yeah.
as an Indian, which could be a biased history. And they oppressed apparently East Pakistan, and they were um, uh, killing people, raping women in East Pakistan. And at one point of time, India, there was a refugee crisis in which close to 10 million or more people of East Pakistan moved into India. But then again, I have to again keep warning myself that this is the history I was taught, and I should seek out more independent history. And then Indira Gandhi, who was the ruler of India, um, triggered independence of East Pakistan, which became Bangladesh.
Yeah, India actually assisted with that war, which, and so Bangladesh went its own way, but well, it does raise the question, why didn't East Pakistan keep the name, and the West would have had to come up with a new name, but it I guess sometimes we just don't know why those things work out, and the boundaries, are very actually very complicated. They're definitely not straight lines, these countries, but I assume that's by ethnicity. You said Bangladesh is pretty much all one language and all one,
Well, from what I understand, yes, there could be at the border areas, there could be slightly different
yeah,
languages, but they are Bengali languages. The border is so complicated that there are areas of Bangladesh inside the border of India. So these are islands of Bangladesh inside India, and there are islands of India inside Bangladesh. Although a lot of those were cleaned up by the governments of Sheikh Hasina and Modi, in which they exchanged bits and pieces to redo the border, which was, I think, a good step for both the societies, because those islands of India within Bangladesh and Bangladesh's island within India didn't really work very well.
it can make things hard on both sides. So,
Yeah, well, also these countries cannot keep open borders. Unlike what happens in West
yeah,
Europe, these countries have no open borders. It's virtually impossible to go to to any of the neighboring countries from India through road.
so Indians don't go to Pakistan, Pakistan doesn't go to India, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the borders are completely closed. If I wanted to go to Pakistan
Yeah,
from let's say Amritsar to Lahore, which are almost couple of hours of drive away, I would need to fly to probably New Delhi, take a flight to Dubai, and then from take a flight to Dubai to Lahore. It would be maybe a 24-hour job rather than a couple of hour of drive
yeah.
to Pakistan.
Yeah, I've noticed India of course, India is a very odd shape too. You have that little section over on the east that's almost split from the rest of the country, you know? Is that just because of the way the populations happen to live is or what?
That's how the British consolidated the area. So again, these parts would
Yeah,
not be parts of India had the British not consolidated them. And also the reason why they survived as a part of India is because in the mid 20th century, China was going through a huge crisis, civil war, all kinds of cultural war, cultural um, revolution and the Long March, etc., were happening in China. So the east, that part, including Bhutan and Sikkim, were more in they were probably more interested in being parts of Indian control over Chinese control.
that makes sense, yes, so and Myanmar was never really a part of the Indian colony, as you said to me. So
Well,
there's
I think it's because the British, while they controlled what came to be known as India from their headquarters
Mhm.
in Calcutta, they
Yeah.
did not necessarily do that with Myanmar and Sri Lanka. So when these areas became independent around the same time, they became separate countries rather
Mhm.
than one country.
Yes. Mhm. And Sri Lanka, isn't it mostly Muslim too? I mean, what can you tell me about Sri
No,
Lanka?
no. Sri
Oh,
Lanka is mostly Buddhist and
Buddhist. Okay.
partly Hindu because of
Okay.
the Tamil and mostly Buddhist. That's the
Well,
majority.
I've heard they're very different from India though. So
It's a heaven compared to India. I could live in Sri Lanka, but I would shoot myself if I had to live in India.
is it pretty much one language, one language too, or is it kind of divided?
I think there are basically two languages. One is Tamil and one is Sinhalese. These are two separate languages. Tamil is was brought in
Yeah.
from the southern part of India, whereas Sinhalese is the original
Yeah.
language of
Mhm.
Sri Lanka. And surprisingly, these people, the Sinhalese, are migrants from Bengal, which is northeastern part of India and Bangladesh. So these are historically those racially those people.
Okay. Yeah. So you do you think we'll see these countries split up anytime soon, or do you think they'll just kind of stay as they are? I mean, what's the future for any of them right now?
They will fall apart. They will fragment
Yeah.
into smaller tribal parts with time. And the reason is that there is no cohesive force keeping these countries together. Myanmar is a good example, actually. Myanmar is not one country in any practical way today. It is a very fragmented place. There are all kinds of regions controlled by insurgents, and that
Mhm.
has been the case throughout the history of Myanmar. The junta, the military of Myanmar, which controls the country, has control over only bits and pieces of Myanmar. And I think eventually that is the future of all these countries, Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. They will fragment into smaller pieces because there's nothing keeping them together except for the hatred of the other people.
Yeah, yeah, and I know there's the Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar, who don't seem to be one about anybody. I don't know why they would what because they don't really they're treated like second-class citizens in Myanmar.
Yeah,
So
but again, as I said, it's very important to remember that you get a sense of brotherhood, the fake sense of brotherhood in these countries by hating someone else. So you have to identify someone to hate so that you can stay together. So I don't know how bad Rohingya Muslims are, but my guess would be that they are probably there's probably nothing wrong about them except that
yeah,
the Buddhist needed someone to hate to give themselves a sane sense of togetherness.
that, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like it's that way everywhere. That there needs to create brotherhood, there needs to be hate against somebody. I mean,
Yes and no to a different degree,
well,
though, Chris. I see a lot of I also see that there's something called English use an expression, excuse my French, when they use profanities. So
yeah,
they need to hate someone. When I
yeah,
lived in England, someone said that Swiss are the most second most hated people in Europe. Germans were the most hated. This has all become jokes today. But yes, to a certain degree, people need to hate someone to have a fake sense of brotherhood. But the difference of degree, which is what matters, because that's what I said. You are not a saint. I'm not a saint. The English of the past were not saints. But to a certain degree, we are all the same, but the difference between the need to have an external enemy in the Western world is very, very, very different from a similar need in the tropical countries. people in South Asia are obsessed with hating other people. 99.9999% of their psyche is overpowered by their obsessive hatred for other people. Whereas that might be a fraction of the
Yeah.
psyche of people in the Western world, or at least the rational part of the Western psyche overpowers their sinful nature. It is the part of our sinful nature, and the religion and the virtues overpower that sinful nature. Now, I have had conflicts in the West, Chris, and I have legal
Yeah.
conflicts with people, and I have seen that they know exactly the boundaries within which they operate. They will not make completely fake claims in a legal dispute. They know the boundaries are, and they know that some of their hate is a product of their baser instincts,
Yeah.
and their rational mind overtakes that animalistic part and subdues it eventually. So the difference in degree is humongous between the tropical countries of South Asia and the Western and Far Eastern countries.
Well, yeah, I know, but, Giant, I mean, I just look at, the way, for example, Armenia and Azerbaijan, or Serbs and Croatians, uh, or in some cases, Japan and China don't really like each other either, and you even see that among I don't know, you even see that among some Hispanic groups in America. I mean, Mexicans and Cubans don't really like each other, so I really do, maybe it's not as strong in the West, but
Yeah,
I still think it exists very much in the West.
Yeah, but remember, I mean, the moment you talk about
Yeah,
Azerbaijan and Armenians and you're talking about Mexicans, you are already moving very strongly towards the tropical countries. As you move southeast from northern part of Europe, you become
yeah,
more and more Arab and Asia's
yeah,
Arab and South Asian. And similarly, as you go south from northern part of Europe towards the south, you become more Arabic, and so
yeah,
the mentality changes. And Hispanics, it's a very strange word because it encompasses the Europe people of European ethnicity all the way to people of African or native Indian origin. So it's a very strange word, but the for me the yardstick is that as you go more tropical, harmony disappears, uh, materialism increases, and the concept of honor and values go away, irrespective of your religion. I
yeah,
mean, look at Hispanics; they could be Christians, but they could be they could be, apart from the facade, they would go to the village square in and these are very nice squares in whole of Latin America. They would go to the church, but they would be devoid of moral fabric once they are outside the church.
yeah, you're not the only, I think Jordan Peterson has made a similar observation, though, that as you get more into the tropical areas, there does seem to be less virtue, and I'm wondering why that is, how weather would impact our outlook on life. It's maybe it's
I
just
think
because
it's
we don't have to work because it never gets cold, we never have to work hard to keep ourselves warm. I mean, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, and also, the cold climate gets rid of low IQ people, and eugenics and natural
Yeah.
eugenics happens in those countries.
Well, yeah.
People are forced to be rational and honorable in their conduct because they want, if I leave my wife with you today, I'm thinking that you will need to do the same thing tomorrow because it's close, cold environment. You hunted
Yeah.
today and tomorrow I will hunt, so we cooperate to share the food today. So in the colder climates people had to evolve those virtues, I think primarily for
Yeah.
utilitarian purposes. And morality is nothing but utilitarian from a certain point of view. But tropical people did not need that because apple grew on the tree irrespective of what happened, and it fell from the tree whether you worked for it or not. So these people in tropical countries have a tendency to be, they are atomized, and the more tropical
Yeah.
you become more and more atomized,
Mhm.
and they can't work in harmony. So if you think that Muslims are a collective, you're completely wrong. They hate each other. They are always in fight with each other. The Shia, Sunni, Ahmadi problem goes on and on in these within those countries.
Yeah.
But they seek out an outsider as an enemy to bring a fake harmony within themselves. But that is never lasting. And that is why I said that these countries throughout South Asia will fragment into tribal areas eventually. Now, my guess is that sub-Saharan Africans never developed the concept of nationhood, except probably in the very southern part of
Mhm.
sub-Saharan Africa. So they are still very tribal. They think in tribal terms. So whether they fall apart into tribal areas or not, it probably doesn't matter, and they probably operate in tribal terms anyway because there are no really border controls, from what I understand, within most sub-Saharan African countries.
Well, John, even the squirrels figured out, "Oh, I need to store nuts for the winter." Squirrels have figured that out. It's
Yeah.
it's pretty well, yeah, so I do wonder if that's part of the case, and like you've said about Islam, that's one thing I've said, if Israel disappeared tomorrow, you would suddenly have a bunch of infighting among Muslims because Israel's the one thing that keeps them unified.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, yes and no, because parts of the Muslim world can be very nice. I have spent a good amount of time in many Middle Eastern countries, and some of them are very nice. Um, but uh, at least the Muslims of Pakistan and Bangladesh and Syria and Iraq will have problems staying together if there were not an external enemy they could focus on.
And, Giant, I know maybe this sounds crazy. Maybe this is actually a function that sports serves. I mean, the Australians and New Zealanders, they like to tell jokes about each other. But they can get all that anger out on the rugby field. So they go play rugby and they can all get in and scream and say, "Yeah, and maybe that gets out some of this. Maybe that is kind of a pressure release. So so rugby has replaced war in a certain way, and certainly that's a vast improvement.
Well,
Maybe cricket too. Maybe India and
y-
Pakistan could play cricket
yeah,
against each other instead of
yeah, but I still
yeah,
see watching sport as entertainment,
yeah,
as the nationalism of
yeah,
low level people, because they express their fake nationalism and fake brotherhood through the sport.
true.
And the worst thing is that they lack a vision to have a higher purpose in life than their team winning, which depresses me about the larger society, and that is the reason why I dislike the concept of democracy. These people should never have the right to vote.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's just something I've observed over the years, Giant. Uh, I think we've covered just about everything. This has been another really good show. So, is there, is there anything? And I also remember too, you were commenting, about how the Indian newspapers were so proud because India won a gold medal at the Olympics. And I mean, and if you look per capita, no country does worse at the Olympics than India. I mean, yeah,
Right now, today the news, and we
yeah,
are on the 16th of July, 2025. The big news, the headline news in India is that an Indian astronaut, India achieved a visit to the International Space Center. Now, the problem is that it's all fake. There's nothing about it. India paid $60 million for to send an Indian on a private mission, an American private mission. So he was just a passenger. He was a tourist to the space center, and he returned back. So India paid for someone's tourism, $60 million, to claim that it achieved something big in the space arena. It's all demagoguery and fakeness with these countries.
yeah, there is a lot of fakeness. Well, well, I don't know, but yeah, well, I think there's a lot of fakeness everywhere, unfortunately. But well,
Yeah,
John,
again, it's very important for Americans to understand that the degree of difference is humongous. Uh, and that is why people like me want to live in the US. And more Indian nationalists want to live in the US. So they all want to live in US while they are nationalistic of their hellholes. But the West is still a heaven compared to the hellholes of the tropical countries on
Yeah.
relative basis.
But, Jai, that's one thing. You all I always just kind of find it funny when you bash India. So many Indians in America, and sometimes also the kids of India will never stop going on and on about the glories of India, like
Well,
talking like
you should learn to ask a question,
yeah,
and the question should be, why don't you return back to India? India actually has a very progressive and liberal policy to give nationality of India to any racial Indian. So if you are a third generation Indian living in the US, you can still move to India within about 3 or 4 months' time. So India has an amazing, liberal policy for you to relocate. So just move back to India.
yeah, okay, well, yeah, well, yeah. Jai, the one thing also too is I gotta say is I wish they would put their time zone on the hour. I had that one show with you, and I can convert the hours pretty easily, but when you start putting in partial hours, it just makes it a lot more confusing. But anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, well, please like the video, subscribe to the channel on all these sites I'm on. Go buy my novel, Escape from the Village. Check out my Substack. Go to Buy Me a Coffee. Thank you, Jayant Bhandari. It's been great having you on here. I'm Chris Baker. We're out. Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you.